Dr. David Clark.
Very good.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that member is clearly living in a parallel universe. The talk about surplus, the endless talk about surplus, a surplus we are yet to see. The Minister says that the economy is finally in the zone, and I think he probably means the red zone, where it's always been under his government. This government has run two election campaigns on surplus, and yet we have not seen a single surplus. We have not yet seen one from this government. This is a government that has campaigned on the issue and failed. It has failed. It is not being straight with New Zealanders. But yet they will ask ordinary New Zealanders to tighten their belts. And we'll hear it again this budget. We'll hear that ordinary New Zealanders should tighten their belts. They'll cut education spending. They'll cut spending on domestic violence. They'll cut spending left, right and centre. Ordinary New Zealanders should expect to get fewer services. That's what this government is saying, that you should expect as ordinary citizens to get fewer surpluses. And why is that? Because there are expensive tax cuts to pay for. This is the government that gave 40% of the big tax package. It gave 40% of the value to the top 10% of earners, and the bottom 20% got just 2%, and that was swallowed up in a GST increase. So people remember back, those tax cuts are tax cuts that ordinary New Zealanders are still paying for, and cuts to health services, cuts to education, cuts to roading. This is the government that continues to ask ordinary New Zealanders to cut their budgets while it shovels tax cuts at the wealthiest New Zealanders, the wealthiest few. And this is a consistent message from this government because it's trying to get to that surplus. It's asking small businesses to pay more in ACC when they have had recommendations from Treasury, from independent reports and from ACC itself saying they are well overfunded at ACC. But no, they are still asking businesses to pay $350 million more than they need to, and that's assuming a very conservative buffer. That is costing jobs for ordinary New Zealanders. This government is not supporting business, it is not supporting small business, and we've seen that in the red tape throughout its time as it's expected employers with the paperboy tax to collect additional data, as we've seen them expect employers to collect data, to deal with child support payments they didn't have to before. They keep loading the regulatory red tape on small businesses. They load the ACC charges on small businesses. They expect ordinary New Zealanders who are struggling to get ahead to keep paying over and over and over again so they can try and get closer to that surplus whilst they are giving huge tax cuts to the very top 1 or 2% of New Zealanders. But that's what we'll hear again in this budget. We'll hear tighten your belts again, please, middle New Zealand. We've got some expensive tax cuts for the wealthiest New Zealanders to pay, and we're going to cut your services again. That's what New Zealanders are hearing. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know that that at the same time the money is going to those wealthiest few, and we know the list of those corporate welfare deals that this government has had. We've heard about the Cabinet Club. We've heard about John Key going to dinner with Dong Hua Lu. We know that this is a government that has a special access agreement for wealthy donors. We know that this is a government that is not being straight with New Zealanders. We know with GCSB, the Prime Minister wasn't sure who the new agency head was. Turns out it was his mate's brother. We heard he wasn't sure whether he'd been in touch with him. Then we heard he'd rung him up about the GCSB. So this is a government that's not being straight. With the Iraq thing, the being part of the club, the government was for once caught out telling the truth. This government is always looking out for its wealthy mates. We saw the endorsements around Orovita. We saw Judith Collins over there donkey deep in it. We see housing where speculators in the Auckland market are being looked after while this government does nothing to fix the problem for ordinary New Zealanders. Houses have been going up $1,000 a week in Auckland. That is for big speculators $1,000 a week on every home they own that they are earning. How much would every Aucklander like to be earning $1,000 more a week, especially those who cannot afford houses right now? This is a government that's looking after the wealthy and not looking after the interests of middle New Zealand. We know corporate welfare for Rio Tinto. We know about corporate welfare for Chorus. And my, do we know about corporate welfare for Sky City. This government is a government which has had many MPs fall from grace, and that list is getting longer. We had Pansy Wong, Richard Worth, Bill Heatley, Mr Williamson, Mr Collins, Mr Gilmore, Ms Hawiti, Mr Sabin. The list goes on. There'll be more before this term is out. It's an arrogant government that's out of touch with ordinary New Zealanders and committed to helping the wealthiest few at the top. And that's not even mentioning the teapot tapes and the other dishonesty that we've seen, or the PGP partnerships where the money is being shoveled with no measures of success at National Party donors. These are the kinds of moves we're seeing from a government that's determined to look after its mates at the expense of ordinary New Zealanders who in this budget again will be asked to tighten their belts. Please tighten your belts, ordinary New Zealanders. This government's got some corporate welfare on the way. It's trying to get to that surplus, and hard-working New Zealanders and small businesses will be asked to pay too much again in ACC levies as the government tries to get to its first surplus. And let's think about this ACC charge, the $350 million too much that is hurting our economy. It's been estimated in an independent report that will cost 700 jobs in New Zealand, that $350 million a year. We've heard about it from ACC, and we've heard about it from the Treasury. Now, the Sky City deal, Mr Speaker, I'd like to say a little bit more about that. It's an example of this kind of corporate cronyism that we've seen right through, Mr Speaker, from start to finish. John Key is up to his eyeballs in this deal. He kicked it off with the dinner with Sky City executives, saying that the dinner, he himself said, we discussed a possible national convention centre and they raised issues relating to the Gambling Act. And that's where we got those pokie machines. He told his officials to cancel their business case study and close off the Sky City option. His ministers and officials repeatedly met with Sky City while holding off other tenderers. No one but Sky City was ever going to secure this deal. And then the Auditor General, of course, in her hard-hitting report, said that this process was flawed and neither transparent nor even-handed. This was a deal that was rotten from the start. And built into that deal, right from the start, to get it off the political agenda, it was done quickly. It was a dirty deal done quickly, were provisions that enabled the government later to say, we can hand over more cash to Sky City. Well, the Labour Party launched a petition and the National Party backed off on giving extra money to Sky City. But now they're still looking out for Sky City's bottom line. They are now determined to cut the quality of the convention centre to preserve Sky City's bottom line. And ordinary New Zealanders are being asked to tighten their belts meantime, whilst they are delivering a convention centre that is below what was agreed in the initial deal. And the whole of election year, the National Party had the audacity to get up and say this was going to be a free convention centre. The original report into the convention centre, written by an independent reporter, still on the Ministry of Economic Development website, says that it was going to create a net 18 jobs for the New Zealand economy. A net 18 jobs. And that was when it was an iconic structure, attracting international business. Why only 18 jobs for the New Zealand economy? Because it's stealing them off Hamilton, Rotorua and Taupo. That's what the independent analysis found. That's why Mr Bennett's over there quaking in his seat. He knows that Hamilton jobs are going to go up to Auckland as a part of having a new flash convention centre in Auckland. The business will be taken out of the regions to Auckland, and it's sponsored by the taxpayer. So that is the government approach. But they're allowing Sky City to cut the quality of the convention centre to compete domestically with other players. That's not why government gets involved in these things. The government is involved in these things, or should be, to create an international business that brings new people to New Zealand, not that just takes them off Mr Bennett in Hamilton and off his constituents and makes them poorer. But that's what we see here. And the government's put itself over a barrel here, we know, but it's so committed to corporate welfare that it finds itself in these positions defending the bottom line for Sky City. And that, Mr Speaker, sums up this government's contribution. They haven't achieved their goals and they're not achieving their goals. They're failing to reach surplus again for the 7th time in a row. 7 budgets, 7 failures to reach surplus. The Labour government had 9 budgets and 9 surpluses. Let's not forget that track record. So this government is determined to carry on with their corporate welfare, with their gerrymandering, their John-mandering and their Joyce-mandering. They're still borrowing $1 million every hour of every day to afford their corporate promises, and they will ask you, New Zealanders, to tighten your belts again. I say, be warned.
Jamie Lee Ross.
Mr. Speaker, that